Welcome to Tech Talk. I'm James Wyngaard, the Executive Director of Rice Lake Community Media, and I'm being joined, as always, on this show by the Director of WTCO TV in Trempealeau County, and that is Derek Westby. Hi, Derek.
Hey, James. How are you?
I am well. Good to see you again for another edition of Tech Talk, Director Tech Talk, as a matter of fact, and lots of things, fun things to talk about this time, and we're really going to kind of focus on one topic today, and what we're going to talk about is wireless technology and the kind of the variations thereof. And so as we get into this, let's talk a little bit about what wireless technology is. And the first thing we're going to talk about is Wi-Fi. What do we have as far as Wi-Fi?
Well, Wi-Fi has been out since 1997 to consumers. It came out much more before that, but mostly military type stuff. But it came out in 1997, and the standards for Wi-Fi are actually set by a committee. And the committee is called the 802.11 Committee. And they've set many standards throughout time. It all started with Wi-Fi A, and then it went B, G, N, AC, and now they're on AX, which is the Wi-Fi 6, which some of you have. And there were a whole lot more standards that weren't really widely released. They were kind of interim standards for testing, but the initial Wi-Fi topped out at wireless speeds of 11 megabits per second. And now it's just insane how fast those can get.
Right. Yeah. I mean, some wireless service providers, and we'll get into kind of the whole cellular part of it is a very different discussion for a different day. But, when you talk about the speeds that you can get on Wi-Fi, like at my house, I have fiber, but also going through a router, which gives me Wi-Fi at my house. So I have 500 up and 500 megabytes up and 500 megabytes down. And you were talking that the original Wi-Fi standard was 11. So we're almost 50 times at that point at this point.
Well, and actually Wi-Fi 6 tops out at speeds of 9.6 gigabits per second. So you must have Wi-Fi 6 at your house, which means you're being limited on the Wi-Fi end only by your internet service provider, because that's what you're paying for, is the 500 up, 500 down fiber. But if you were to have another computer on that network and you were transferring between them, like if you had a network attached storage on the network, you could transfer things to that at 9.6 gigabits per second. So that means in 1 second you can transfer almost 10 gigabytes of data.
And for those that, so let's go through that. So we start with kilobytes, right? And 1,000 kilobytes equals a
megabyte,
and 1,000 megabytes equals
a gigabyte,
and 1,000 gigabytes equals
a terabyte.
Right. So
and it keeps going and going and going.
And it keeps right. I think it gets into petabytes or some ridiculous thing, or terabyte. What is it? Petabytes, terabytes?
The largest amount of data that they've come up with right now is called a yottabyte, after Yoda from Star Trek. Yeah. Okay. It's like 100 quadrillion terabytes or something like that. It's huge.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And so with that, the transferring of speeds, and what does that relate to as far as what you can do at home with those types of speeds?
Well, at 11 megabits per second, you can't really stream HD video. You can stream standard definition video, but with 11 megabits per second, you're not going to have a smooth stream. You're not going to have, fast transfer. Once you start hitting like 40 megabits to 60 megabits, you can start streaming on 1 or 2 devices. With the internet, say at your house where you have 500 up and 500 down, you could probably have about 30 devices streaming at the same time. So there are a lot of large businesses that have an internet speed the same as what you have at your house. So.
Right, and now some service providers are talking about they're going to provide, well, some already provide 1 gig internet up and down, and now some are talking about going to 10 gig up and down, which just to me is mind-boggling, considering 10 gig is what, 20 times faster than what I currently have, and I think my internet at home is pretty blazing as it is.
Well, up here in Trempealeau County, we're very fortunate to have a local service provider, and they actually provide speeds up to 1 gigabit per second, and they're working on the 10 gigabit transfer up here in Trempealeau County through fiber. So, you know, like I work in the Trempealeau County Courthouse, and the entire courthouse network runs on 1 gigabit fiber. So that's 300 employees all using data at the same time, and nobody is experiencing any slowdowns.
Yeah, it's just remarkable how far we've come, but how far we still have to go yet. Because as we talk with a lot of politicians and things, it's readily apparent that, you know, we're the kind of the fortunate ones where we're in a position either at home or at work where we have access to these high speeds and fast data rates and all this sort of thing. Still, a lot of places, even kind of within the city, are still limited to those slower speeds and you know, work from home now and school and all that sort of thing. That all still needs to be addressed.
Well, and up here in Trempealeau, or down here in Trempealeau County, we do have lots of areas not served by our broadband provider, where they're using, you know, like DSL type stuff or satellite. But there is an emerging internet provider for rural areas coming out by Elon Musk and his satellites and, you know, gigabit data transfers and all that kind of stuff. And that's coming. It's not quite here yet, but that'll help with people's Wi-Fi in their house.
Sure. So as we switch gears a little bit, let's talk a little bit about Bluetooth. And Bluetooth, of course, is more of a cellular technology, cellular telephone technology, or wireless device technology. Tell me a little bit about the history of Bluetooth, where it came from, where it is now, and then we'll talk about some of those uses.
Yeah, the original Bluetooth standard came out in May of 1998. So it's been out almost as long as Wi-Fi. And it's overseen by a group of special interest group called the Bluetooth Special Interest Group. So real original name. And it when it first came out, that was Bluetooth 1. Now, at the end of 2019, they released Bluetooth 5.2. So they've gone through many versions of Bluetooth. In fact, I'm using Bluetooth right now to hear you. I'm sure you're using Bluetooth right now to hear me. So, and so Bluetooth has been coming along quite a bit with what people are using it for.
So the standard, I think, usage of Bluetooth at this point is, as you kind of mentioned, you're using Bluetooth to hear me, I am to you, with wireless earbuds. You know, of course, prior to the time where cell phone makers decided, I will editorialize in their infinite wisdom, to take away the headphone jack, you know, we were able to plug in earbuds and wired earbuds and whatnot. But now, I guess we still can on some, because if you have an Android device, it's usually a USB-C, and makers still do wired USB-C, or you get a little, you know, you go into dongle life where you have an adapter that goes from, you know, your 1/8 inch and the mini plug to a USB-C, and then that uses the digital signal out of your phone. But now we've got AirPods and AirPod Pros and Jabra, which is mine, and others that use Bluetooth technology into, we're both using laptops to do this program, and when I put my earbud in, the little electronic voice tells me you're connected to two devices, so mine are connected to my laptop and my cell phone at the same time. So technology of the Bluetooth variety has really come a long way.
Well, and speaking of laptops, Bluetooth didn't get added to laptops until 2000. So, I guess that means it's been on laptops for 21 years now. But when it was first developed, it was developed by Ericsson Mobile over in Sweden. So we have Bluetooth thanks to a cell provider in Sweden who started developing it in 1989. It took them quite a while for it to come out because it didn't hit mobile devices until 1999. But it was also added to cars in 1999. So another Bluetooth example is in your car. I'm driving down the road and my car says, "You have a text message from James Wyngaard," and I click listen and it reads me the text message. So that's more modern, but back in the model year of 2000, so that came out in 1999, Chrysler vehicles launched Bluetooth where you could sync your phone with it and make phone calls. That's all it could do. Now there's, music streaming and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing how it's just exploded.
It's ubiquitous. And then you talk about, you've got Android Play and Apple Play, and how you do the phone calls in your car, which I think is one of the better safety procedures that has been involved in cars in a long time, because now you don't have you're not grabbing onto your phone and you've got it in your hand all the time while you're trying to drive and pay attention to what you're supposed to be doing while you're behind the wheel. Yeah.
And in my car, when you have a phone Bluetooth to it, there's actually buttons for dialing 911. So if you get in an accident and you lose your phone, you can just hit the 911 button and it dials 911 on your phone through the sound system. So it's just amazing what you can do with Bluetooth. There's Bluetooth mice, Bluetooth keyboards, Bluetooth monitors, Bluetooth everything.
Right, and pointing devices for certain tablets and all that sort of thing too. So, yeah, and one thing that we've completely forgotten about, or maybe not forgotten, but haven't mentioned, speakers. You see the pill speakers or something like that out at beaches, and somebody's got their cell phone hooked up to it, and off you go with a fun day at the beach with your music. And it's just astounding how far this has come in what really is a relatively short amount of time. 23 years is, I guess really that's an eternity in the tech world, but still, to go from where we started to where we are now, and the future seems endless.
Well, and looking to the future of Bluetooth, right now Bluetooth devices are generally limited to about 30 feet away from your device, which is about 10 meters. But they're working on up to 330 feet or 100 meters, which is, 10 times the distance. So I could be listening to, put my phone down and carry my speaker, across my yard. It's just amazing how that can work.
Right. Yeah. So as we move on, our next topic that we're going to talk about is RF, and that is radio frequency. And Derek is going to give us some interesting historical tidbits on radio frequency, RF.
Well, radio frequencies have been around for a long time. They were originally used during the invention of radio. They've been in consumer devices probably about over 100 years now. And there's the frequency ranges from 3 kilohertz all the way up to 300 gigahertz, and that's considered the RF range. There's low frequency stuff, which is used for like time standards and navigation, and that's the 30 to 300 kilohertz range. And as you move up, things get a little more sophisticated. Like medium frequency is for boat and plane navigation and AM radio. And then high frequency hits still AM radio, but that's when you start getting like mobile radios and ham radio and that kind of stuff into it. Then the next frequency is very high frequency, which a lot of people have heard VHF. And that is like for FM and TV broadcasting to consumers. And then ultra high frequency, UHF, is used for cell phones, mobile radio, wireless, LAN, satellites, radar, all kinds of stuff, 5G. And it gets even higher with the extremely high frequency. They keep finding more frequencies to squeeze things into. So right now the extremely high frequency is used for like satellite and radar and 5G. And then there's a tremendously high frequency, THF, which goes from the 300 gigahertz all the way up to infrared. And right now that's really only for research and designing experimental stuff. But also within those frequencies, there's a bunch of frequencies that are blocked. And those frequencies are blocked specifically for public safety bands. So what was it, 2008 or 2009, the FCC took a chunk of frequencies that were allowed by consumers and said, you can no longer use devices in this because this is now public safety band. And that hit a lot of theaters. They had a lot of microphones in that range, and they had to buy all new microphones.
Well, and that goes to our industry as well, where we had wireless mics and things like that to take into account these new frequencies that were specific to public safety. And after the disaster of 9/11, where in the city of New York they had not enough frequencies to tell the firemen and the police department to get out of the buildings. I think that was really kind of an impetus to say we need to open up those frequencies a little, or more frequencies, in order for public safety to be safe.
Yeah, public safety has to be one of the primary RF users, which is why a lot more has gone through, the Wi-Fi and internet type stuff, because we're no longer using ham radio to talk to each other. We're using cell phones and Zoom and WebEx and all that, whatever other video conferencing provider you want to use. Things have shifted away from RF, which isn't a bad thing at all, because the less RF devices there are, is the less RF interference, because they're going to keep fighting for that same space, and eventually it gets full.
Right, and you talk about the UHF and the VHF frequencies for specifically television. Those have actually been compacted recently as well with this. They called it the FCC Spectrum Repack, where station groups or station owners basically paid the FCC, or the FCC paid them to say, okay, we don't need, or we don't want this channel anymore. And of course, we all know, or maybe some of us know, that the old TV channels used to run from channel 2 all the way up to channel 69. And I think it actually went up even higher, maybe 70s and 80s. But now, with everything being compacted, TV channels are only on channel 2 up to 37, I believe it is. So 38 and above doesn't exist for real TV channels. Now, I know you're going to say, hey, James, but why do I get a channel 47? There's a 47 in Madison. Well, there's a technology that can rescan numbers to the virtual number. So that's why the traditional numbers of your favorite TV channels may not have changed. So you still will get 18 and 19 if and 13 in lacrosse, or what is it in Minneapolis, 4 and 5 and 11 and 9, and so all those are going to stay the same. But in other locations, like in Green Bay, the PBS channel was 38. It's still a virtual channel 38, but the actual frequency that they broadcast on is something very different now.
Well, and even some of those channels are broadcasting on different frequencies. For example, when we lived down around Madison, NBC 15 was actually virtual channel 13. So even though they could have been on frequency for 15, they were on a frequency for 13, but it still showed up, 15, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to whatever they've got. Those are all digital. They're no longer full frequency channels. You get one frequency, and on that you're putting digital channels within it. So that's still more or less like transfer of internet, where the channels aren't modulated anymore, they're encoded, and then your TV decodes it.
Right. Yeah, and it's, I think it's almost the same way in radio, but of course, radio didn't have a repack, essentially. So, on AM, you're still from 550 kilohertz up to 1690 kilohertz, and on FM, you're on 88.1 all the way up to 106.9, or no, 107.9. So, your favorite radio station is still going to be within those guidelines, and it's always interesting to me to look at broadcasting in other countries. Like, I was in Switzerland a few years ago, and they're here, of course, like for the station here at Rice Lake Community Media, our radio is on 105.5. Well, there they have like 89.2 or something like that. So they're on a completely different spectrum scale than what we are.
Well, and if you notice, all of the radio stations in the United States are on an odd decimal point. So they're at 0.1, 0.3. That's to give enough separation between the frequencies where they don't start to overlap and cause interference. Because by law, you're required to accept interference on your devices. It's required. And so if everybody was all squished together, you would start losing channels within a mess of just noise.
Right, and you look at the process of going through the application for low power television or low power radio. One of the rules says you have to look and see what the adjacent channel. So at 105.5, which is what we are, you look at 105.3 and 105.7, and then the second adjacent channel, which would be 1 and 9, to see if there would be any full-powered station that you might interfere with. And if that's the case, then that particular channel number would be thrown out as unusable for low power.
Yep.
And that's really getting into the weeds of application processes and things like that, but still. So as we go on, one more topic when it comes to wireless technology that we wanted to visit about, and we kind of touched on it already a little bit, and that's cellular technology. One of which that I'm intimately familiar with, having worked for a cellular company for a number of years prior to coming up here to Rice Lake. And what are you going to tell us about cellular technology, Derek?
Well, we're only going to touch a little bit on cellular technology because we're planning on doing an entire tech talk on cellular technology. But cell phone companies started in Tokyo, Japan, because everything seems to start in Japan. And they started in 1979. So we were a little behind on that. And cell companies operate on 4 bands. There's 700 megahertz, 800 megahertz, PCS, and AWS. And most of the modern cell providers are up in the PCS and AWS bands, especially like the 5G providers, because those frequencies just provide more space for transmitting data and at a shorter wavelength, which is why when we're talking 5G, they're putting 5G towers, like every, like 17 in a city, because it's such a short band to give you so much data transfer that it doesn't have as much range.
And also, I should also mention that more penetration within buildings as well.
Yes. Yep. There's a lot of great things that come with 5G. It's just they have to put up significantly more towers in closer spaces where, 1X and 3G and all that, those had much wider space, but not as good building penetration, not near as fast data transfer, which is why, a lot of spaces are still 5G or 3G or 1X, or 4G, not 5G. And very few places, especially in rural areas like Trempealeau County, very few places are going to get 5G anytime soon. It'll get here, just like cell service slowly got here. But there's a lot of places in our county where I'm still getting 3G.
Yeah, and it's going to be a while, and it's a constantly evolving process where the jump from 3G to 4G took, I think it was 4 or 5 years, and then to jump from 4G to 5G only took about 2 years, and now where do we go from here? What is 6G going to look like, if there is a thing, or 7G? It's astounding to me how that process goes so fast, and to get into that process, as Derek said, we're going to talk a lot about cellular technology in a separate show, which we will do in the future. But it's really amazing how quickly that has changed, and the fact that 5G really is only data driven; it's not even voice driven. But they're able to combine the voice quality to kind of match that data quality as well.
Yep.
So that's going to wrap us up for this time. We've gone our full half hour here just about. And Derek, what do you want to tell everybody before we go?
Well, just always do your research and learn about as much as you can. There's a lot to learn about all of this stuff, and this was just a brief touch on all of it.
Right. Yeah. And as Derek says, please do your own research. We're here to give you a very, very high level, very generalized look at some of the technology things that we talk about. But we certainly always encourage you, especially when it comes to the internet safety and that sort of thing. And do your homework and make the best decision for yourself. So with that, we will wrap things up for this edition of Director Tech Talk. I'm James Wyngaard from Rice Lake Community Media, and
I'm Derek Westby from WTCO in Trempealeau County.
And we will see you next time on Director Tech Talk.